What's up, y'all? You're watching Union Minded. I'm your host, Eric, and today I want to read an excerpt from Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. It specifically pertains to the elections between 1980 and 1994, 92, regarding Reagan, Bush, and that time period. As we read through this, you'll learn that in that time period, it was described as Reagan having this landslide victory. And you hear the same thing today. Trump likes to boast about a landslide victory and basically creating a mandate. But that's a narrative that gets used, and then that narrative is used as justification for doing whatever horrible policy that they want to do. In Reagan's case, he used his landslide victory to decimate unions and go completely against workers and fight and slash the social safety net, slash taxes. He was a horrible president. He was really just an actor and a player of a role, but he was very useful and narrative was used. But let's dive into this section, this segment of this book that I was reading it, and it rang true to what's going on today, and so I want to read it for you guys. The repeated elections of Republican candidates, Reagan in 1980 and 84, George Bush in 88, were treated by the press with words like landslide and overwhelming victory. They were ignoring four facts: that roughly half of the population, though eligible to vote, did not; that those who did vote were limited severely in their choices to the two parties that monopolized the money and the media; that as a result, many of their votes were cast without enthusiasm; and that there was little relationship between voting for a candidate and voting for specific policies. Policies are key, guys. In 1980, Reagan received 51.6% of the popular vote, while Jimmy Carter received 41.7%, and John Anderson, a liberal Republican running on a third-party ticket, received 6.7%. Only 54% of the voting age population voted, so that of the total eligible to vote, it's everybody that could have voted, 27% is the real number that voted for Reagan. A survey by the New York Times found that only 11% of those who voted for Reagan did so because he was, quote, a real conservative. 3 times as many said that they voted for him because, quote, it was time for a change. For a second term running against former Vice President Walter Mondale, Reagan won 59% of the popular vote. But with half the electorate not voting, in actuality, it was 29% of the voting population. In the 1988 election, with Vice President George Bush running against Democrat Michael Dukakis, Bush's 54% victory added up to about 27% of the eligible voters. Isn't that interesting? But they say landslide. It's really in actuality a very small number. Because our peculiar voting arrangements allow a small margin of popular votes to become a huge majority of electoral votes, the media can talk about an overwhelming victory, thus deceiving their readers and disheartening those who don't look closely at the statistics. Could one say from these figures that the American people wanted Reagan or Bush as president? One could certainly say that more voters preferred the Republican candidates to their opponents, but even more seemed to want neither candidate. And we're at a state now where the Democratic Party doesn't represent working people. They represent the corporations. The Republican Party doesn't represent peoples. They represent the billionaires. And so you have both parties serving the wealthy, and nobody's looking out for the working people. And so it's crazy because the majority of folks don't vote. Nevertheless, on the basis of these slim electoral pluralities, Reagan and Bush would claim that the people had spoken. Indeed, when the people did speak about issues in surveys of public opinion, they expressed beliefs to which neither the Republican nor Democratic parties paid attention. Isn't that peculiar that this is talking about in the 1980s? We're talking about we're in 2025 and we say the same thing, that neither party speaks for us, neither party takes up our issues. This is from the 80s. And it's saying that when they were on polling, the population was at a different place from the government, either party. And this is way back then. For instance, both parties through the 80s and early 90s kept strict limits on social programs for the poor on the grounds that this would require more taxes, and the people, quote unquote, did not want higher taxes. This was certainly true as a general proposition that Americans wanted to pay as little in taxes as possible. But when they were asked if they would be willing to pay higher taxes for specific purposes like health and education, they said yes, they would. For instance, a 1990 poll of Boston area voters showed that 54% of them would pay more taxes if that would go towards cleaning up the environment. I think it's similar now. And when higher taxes were presented in class terms rather than as a general proposal, people were quite clear. A Wall Street Journal NBC News poll in December of 1990 showed that 84% of the respondents favored a surtax on millionaires, not billionaires, millionaires. This provision was dropped around that time from a Democratic-Republican budget compromise. Notice they dropped the surtax on being a millionaire in that budget compromise. And in this last budget compromise, they cut Medicaid and SNAP and all kinds of other goodies that help poor people survive, and they cut it to a tune of over $1 trillion in total cuts to give a tax cut to the wealthy again. Even though 51% of the respondents were in favor of raising the capital gains tax, neither major party favored that either. A Harris-Harvard School of Public Health poll of '89 showed that most Americans, 61%, favored a Canadian-type health system in which the government was the single payer to doctors and hospitals, bypassing the insurance companies and offering universal medical coverage to everyone. 1989, guys. 1989. Neither the Democratic nor the Republican Party adopted this as its program, although both insisted they wanted to reform the health system. A survey by the Gordon Black Corporation for the National Press Club in 1992 found that 59% of all voters wanted a 50% cut in defense spending within 5 years. Neither of the major parties was willing to make major cuts in the military budget. How the public felt about government aid to the poor seemed to depend on how the question was put. Both parties and the media talked incessantly about the welfare system that was not working, and the word welfare became a signal for opposition. When people were asked if more money should be allocated to welfare, 23% said no. But when the same people were asked, should the government help the poor, 64% said yes. I'm going to stop there. But you can see that the majority wants universal health care. The majority wants to help the needy. The majority wants to welcome the immigrant. The majority wants to be kind. The majority wants to cut defense spending. But the majority doesn't get what it wants, because the two-party system is corrupted, and it has been corrupted for as long as I've been alive. We have to work together from the ground up to change things. My name's Eric. You're watching Union Minded. Remember that the fight's not left and right, it's up and down. It's going to take solidarity to win always. Each one teach one, get out there and reach one. And remember that there can be no union without you and I, front and center. So let's go. Peace.